Good morning. It's March 19th, and what we're going to do today is we're going to explore kind of an iconic little high plains town, Roy, New Mexico. And I'm going to show it to you and kind of explain what you're seeing. And I think it's going to be interesting because it really, when you drive through these places, maybe you're going cross country or something and you're not familiar with them, you don't really know what the story is, how they got there, or anything of that nature. So we're actually gonna go into all that for you. So anyway, like as I said, we're in Roy, New Mexico. It's a town a little under 6,000 feet in elevation here in northeastern New Mexico. And we're gonna run down here. We're going through the residential districts, going down towards Main Street. You can notice that the town is actually fairly good sized and somewhat physically good sized and somewhat spread out, and you're very quickly going to begin to get the impression that there was probably a lot more people here than there is now at one point, and that's definitely a correct impression. Just basic statistics, I believe it, I don't really know, but it probably topped out at near 800 people in the early 20th century, perhaps the 30s or 40s. Today, might be 250, maybe 200. I don't exactly know, but that's ballpark. So anyway, we're coming up towards Main Street, and we're going to see a few interesting old businesses. It's really, talk about historic Americana, man. This is where you see it. The old like Route 66, we're not on Route 66, but it's the same deal. The old like Route 66 nostalgia. You know, some of the people come from, you know, foreign countries even to see this stuff. They call it sun-faded Americana because a lot of this stuff is absolutely original storefronts and decor and even vehicles, as you've been seeing, sitting since the 1950s and 60s right in place. People come from as far as Germany to see this, believe it or not, and I've met them. So there's the old Mesa Hotel. It's sometimes open. I'm not sure if it is right now. We come up to the fuel stop. Now that's an operating 24-hour pump. Very, very important thing for a community this size. And you can get tire repair and tire changes there too. So this is a going community. That's the number one thing I want to emphasize. This isn't a dead town. You got a little place you can get coffee there. Of course, you've got these abandoned department stores. You've got an abandoned movie theater. That is an operating mechanic shop. Once again, extremely important in these communities. And then this is interesting. We're coming up to sort of an abandoned, large abandoned complex that was several stores and the Florsham Printing Company of all things. We've got an abandoned grocery store on the right. Then we swing in here. We've got a cafe, which is more of a convenience store now. We've got an abandoned old food store, you know, some kind of mechanical type things. This little road down here is interesting. We've got an old, there's some old farm equipment dealers down here, which is pretty fascinating. You'll just have to hold on for 1 second till I can get there, but you're gonna see. Yeah, there we go. There's some good Americana for you. Sherbet Implement Company, of course, long closed. So anyway, to get to the story here, what is this town, why is it here, and what has happened to it? Very, very simple answers for the most part. This town was established in the early part of the 20th century by basically a combination of the Homestead Act era and the railroad. So the railroad ran right through here, and the railroad and or the government in some sort of partnership I'm not an expert on, established absolutely from scratch villages out here on the plains. We could say approximately every 10 miles along the lines. So what there would have been here is there would have been a railroad station. They laid out, they platted out a town. I think they typically gave away lots. You know, people threw up their homes and they got off the train and they were here. So that's the deal. Now, what was the purpose of this town? Okay, well, that comes back to the homesteading, because the whole area around here was subdivided into lots of, 160, 320 acres, and they were farming. They were farming dryland wheat. So this was like the overwhelming commercial center for essentially a relatively populous farming community of probably 2,000 to 3,000 people, between the farmers and the townspeople. So this was before the automobile, or at least before people were driving 100 miles into a Walmart. So anything you needed, from feed to barbers, movie theaters, restaurants, mechanics, it was essentially all had to be right here to serve that population. So that's what these little towns are for. They were established from scratch as sort of, you could call, service centers for a farming community which no longer exists. And that kind of gets back to the question of, why these towns, frankly, have a large percentage of abandoned homes and businesses. It's not because people don't care. It's not because the community has been given up on in any way. It's simply that the dryland wheat farming proved, and it's interesting, I say that, there's an old tractor just sitting there. Anyway, the dryland wheat farming proved to be impracticable. On a good rainfall year, it works out here. They made a lot of money at times. But on a bad year, you lose your shirt and get zero crop on wheat here. So the attrition over time eventually drove all of the wheat farmers out of business. Now, the land was not abandoned, but the land transferred from wheat farming to beef cattle ranching. And the trick to that is a one-family beef cattle ranch is vastly larger than a wheat farm. One family out here might have been trying to make a living wheat farming 360 acres, but typically a full-time ranching family today, they could be ranching 10 sections, and a section is 640 acres. So essentially, the number of humans per acre that the land economically and biologically supports in cattle ranching is less than one person per square mile. So when the entire county transferred to cattle ranching, the population of the county over time dropped from, I think the peak was 5,000 to, I believe, 600 today in the entire county. And that's fairly intractable, because you've got your necessary cattle ranching population, which, to keep this entire county being grazed by cattle, probably takes less than 200 full-time working men. And then you've got retirees, you've got people that work at the schools and the remaining service businesses. But that is, in a nutshell, what you're seeing when you drive across the plains and you see these towns that are half abandoned. It's simply that the economically necessary population has often shrunk by as much as 5 times since the early 20th century, and the facilities in these towns to serve the remaining population is simply not what it was at an earlier time. So you have bizarre sites like abandoned movie theaters in these little towns, and you think, how on earth was there ever a movie theater here? Well, that's the answer, is it used to be vastly more population, and it seems that, once an area goes out of crop farming, the population stabilizes at a very low level, and that's pretty much what the Western Plains look like today, and it explains a few things.